And I want to commence by presenting you with a query, one that many among us sidestep given its misleading straightforwardness. Who possesses your sunrise? Not hypothetically, not within some perfect iteration of your existence, but presently today. Who dictates your initial 60 minutes upon awakening? For excessive individuals, the response is nobody, or, more severely, everything else. The gadget vibrates, correspondences clamor, alerts solicit consideration, the globe commences clamoring prior to our even inhaling. And precisely thus, the initial instance of our time, the one that should be ours, is surrendered to the clamor. This isn't solely concerning diversions, it's concerning authority. You observe, the genuine essence of a sunrise custom lacks connection to ticking off a catalog of healthful behaviors. It's unrelated to verdant smoothies or note-taking or attending the gymnasium at 5 a.m. Those aspects are excellent, assuredly, but that's not the essence. The essence is this. A sunrise custom is concerning reclaiming your area prior to the globe seizing it from you. We reside in a period where consideration is wealth. Each application, each advertisement, each framework is conceived to secure a fraction of your concentration. That's not wicked, it's merely commerce. However, we must comprehend its implication. Because if you're not designating where your concentration proceeds, another entity is. And the sunrise, that revered aperture prior to the globe awakening, is the singular juncture of the daytime when we retain an opportunity at existing completely attentive. It's the exclusive instant that hasn't been commandeered yet. The essence of a sunrise custom isn't within the deed, it's within the intent. I encountered a supervisor previously, let's term him James. He bore responsibility for a sizable squad, administered multiple enterprises, possessed a youthful household, and yet he invariably seemed composed, not within a detached manner, within a profoundly established manner. I interrogated him one occasion what his confidential was. He grinned and expressed, I secured the initial 60 minutes of my time. That constituted it, that uncomplicated. But naturally, it wasn't genuinely uncomplicated at all. James elucidated that each sunrise prior to his touching his gadget, prior to his conversing with anybody, prior to his timetable commencing to decree his selections, he carved out duration. Duration to contemplate, not to execute, to exist. Occasionally he inscribed, occasionally he ambled, occasionally he merely reclined with a cup of caffeine. But it constituted his 60 minutes, his stipulations, his intellect, his core. No clamor, no requirements. And here's what lingered with me. If I don't assert that area, he articulated, I evolve into a response to every other entity's requirements. But if I do, if I commence my time by electing myself, I manifest superior for every other entity. We fashioned a culture that celebrates exertion, that venerates busyness, that informs us we're not executing sufficiently unless we're overwhelmed. And yet, the individuals we admire most, the ones who seem to guide with lucidity, presence, and fortitude, they've acquired to master the skill of intermission. Not since they're idle, since they comprehend that within tranquility we discover direction. A sunrise custom isn't concerning effectiveness. It's not a strategy for compressing more into your time. It's concerning initiating your time with a declaration. I am within authority of how I commence. That singular determination to assume authority of the initial 60 minutes transmits a communication to your cerebrum. I am significant. My contemplations are significant. And that communication intensifies. Time after time, it evolves into a blueprint, subsequently a cadence, subsequently a conviction. And ultimately, it sculpts how you guide, how you connect, how you manage pressure, and how you pursue your objectives. It evolves into the groundwork for something considerably grander than merely a custom. It evolves into the framework of a centered existence. Permit me to be explicit. I'm not articulating you necessitate to awaken at 4 a.m. and ponder for 60 minutes while consuming citrus liquid. I'm not intrigued by vending an image. This isn't concerning the aesthetics of custom. It's concerning the authority of intent. Whether you possess 10 minutes or 60, the tenet is identical. Commence purposefully, not coincidentally. There's something potent concerning executing the identical few aspects each sunrise, particularly when the remainder of existence is disordered. It fashions a sensation of certitude, a sort of tranquil inner assurance. It informs you, regardless of what transpires today, I commenced in alignment with who I aspire to be. And within a globe that tugs us in 1,000 directions, that anchor can constitute everything. Because let's be truthful, we can't govern the majority of what transpires during the daytime. Individuals become unwell, gatherings extend tardy, news disseminates, pressure manifests. But when you've possessed your sunrise, when you've centered yourself prior to the disarray commencing, you don't get jolted around as effortlessly. You react instead of responding. You articulate from lucidity instead of apprehension. You guide from groundedness instead of frenzy. And the individuals encircling you perceive that. When supervisors are serene, squads perceive security. When guardians are attentive, offspring perceive recognition. When companions are deliberate, connections intensify. And it all initiates not with an objective or a strategy or an existence blueprint, but with an uncomplicated selection. How will I commence today? That's the essence of a sunrise custom. It's not a productivity trick, it's a personal revolution. It's the tranquil daily defiance against the globe that profits from your diversion. And it's your invitation to guide yourself prior to your guiding anybody else. Thus, tomorrow's sunrise when your alert sounds, don't inquire, what do I have to execute today? Inquire instead, who do I aspire to be when the globe encounters me? And commence there. Excessive individuals contemplate a sunrise custom is concerning self-control, concerning awakening prematurely, remaining fit, ingesting appropriately, and perusing literature while the globe slumbers. And indeed, those aspects are beneficial, but they're not the rationale. Because when you glimpse nearer, when you zoom out, you realize something profounder is transpiring. Your sunrise custom isn't merely a habit, it's a signal. It's a tranquil, potent declaration of who you deem yourself to be. We frequently convey to individuals what we appreciate. We articulate aspects such as, I value my well-being, or I desire to exist more thoughtful, or I'm endeavoring to exist more structured. But what articulates louder than any of that is what we execute when nobody's observing, particularly at the commencement of the daytime. That initial 60 minutes is when you cast your vote, not solely for how the daytime will proceed, but for the kind of individual you are evolving into. Contemplate it. When the globe is still dormant, when the inbox is still hushed, when your gadget hasn't commenced illuminating with requirements, that's the most truthful instant of your entire daytime. You're not performing for anybody, you're not responding to anything, it's merely you. And whatever you elect to execute with that instance unveils what matters to you most. I recall encountering a youthful executive previously. We'll term her Mia. She existed astute, motivated, the kind of individual whose vitality permeated an area. But behind the charisma, there existed this persistent exhaustion within her eyes. She existed operating arduously, invariably on, invariably performing. One occasion during a leadership offsite, she imparted something that lingered with me. She articulated, every daytime I awaken and instantaneously examine my gadget, correspondences, missives, news, and prior to my even brushing my teeth, I already perceive behind. She paused, then articulated something even more truthful. I contemplate I've constructed my existence to seem prosperous, but I don't discern who I am when it's tranquil. That constituted the instant it struck her. She wasn't deficient in productivity, she existed deficient in identity. She had outsourced her sensation of self to the globe's anticipations, and her sunrises, those initial instants of her daytime, mirrored it flawlessly. They weren't filled with intent, they existed filled with reaction. We conversed for a duration following that, and she'd rendered one diminutive alteration, not a dramatic overhaul, merely one aspect. Every sunrise, prior to examining her gadget, she inscribed one sentence. Today, I will manifest as someone who values _, and she populated the void. Fortitude, benevolence, concentration, tranquility, whatever felt authentic. It seized her less than a minute, but that one sentence altered how she ambled into the remainder of the daytime because it reminded her of something so numerous among us overlook. We are not what we execute. We are who we elect to be while we're executing it. Your sunrise custom is your initial act of identity, and identity isn't constructed in grand gestures. It's constructed in diminutive, consistent selections. If you commence your sunrise grounded, reflective, and intentional, that's who you're evolving into, someone who guides from within, not from urgency. There's something sacred concerning the diminutive rituals we fashion. Kindling a candle, reposing in silence, preparing your slumber area with diligence, preparing breakfast without hurrying. These aspects don't seem substantial, but they are because they articulate, "I'm worthy of manifesting for." And they evolve into anchors, symbols, a manner of articulating, "This is who I am," even when nobody else is observing. Contemplate it akin to this. Every sunrise you acquire a blank canvas, and the initial brushstrokes define the tone, the vitality, the style of what ensues. If you commence with disarray, the painting evolves into reactive. But if you commence with lucidity, with purpose, with diligence, the remainder of the daytime commences to adhere to that shape. And it's not solely concerning how you perceive, it's concerning how you manifest for others. Because when your actions correspond to your values, individuals trust you. They perceive it. They sense that you're not merely performing, you're grounded. You're not merely efficient, you're intentional. And that fashions influence, not the kind that emanates from a title, but the kind that emanates from character. I once interrogated a group of supervisors. What do you advocate for? And everyone furnished responses: integrity, fortitude, empathy. But then I interrogated, what's the initial aspect you executed this sunrise? And the response articulated a distinct narrative. The majority of individuals articulated they scrolled their gadget, replied to correspondences, or hastened into gatherings. Now, there's no judgment here. We're all human. But there's a chasm between what we articulate we value and what we practice when nobody's glimpsing. And the aspect concerning that chasm over duration, it erodes assurance, not in others, in ourselves. When our conduct doesn't align with our convictions, we perceive it. We perceive out of sync. But when our sunrise actions mirror who we articulate we are, we commence to trust ourselves anew. And that trust is the root of everything. Leadership, creativity, affection, resilience, it all initiates with self-trust. You don't have to overhaul your existence. You don't necessitate to enlist in a 5 a.m. association. You merely necessitate to heed the communication you're transmitting yourself every sunrise, because that communication matters. It's not concerning perfection. It's concerning presence. Inquire yourself, what does my sunrise articulate concerning what I believe, who I am, what I'm constructing? And if the response doesn't mirror the individual you aspire to be, beneficial news. Tomorrow is a brand new canvas. You acquire to elect anew. You acquire to act purposefully. You acquire to articulate your values through diminutive actions. You acquire to articulate through the tranquil cadence of your custom. This is who I am. This is what I advocate for. And when you execute that sufficiently frequently, something shifts. You cease pursuing identity, you commence living it. Excessive individuals are awaiting motivation to manifest prior to their commencing. They contemplate they necessitate to perceive inspired, driven, completely energized, and prepared prior to their being able to seize the initial stride. But here's the truth. Motivation doesn't come initially. Action does. And not merely any action. Intentional, meaningful action. The kind that transmits a signal to your cerebrum that you're already in motion. It doesn't have to be substantial. In fact, it shouldn't be. It should be diminutive, uncomplicated, lucid. Because the cerebrum doesn't necessitate grand accomplishments to perceive akin to its prevailing. It merely necessitates proof that something has commenced, that progress is plausible, that impetus is plausible. And this is where your sunrise custom evolves into so potent. The manner you commence your daytime, the very initial aspects you execute, evolves into evidence. It articulates your cerebrum, we're not immobilized, we're not behind, we're advancing. And that sensation, that impetus, fuels everything that ensues. I encountered a coach previously who labored with Olympic athletes. He articulated something that altered how I contemplate sunrises. We never commence training at complete velocity. He informed me, we commence with cadence, with blueprint, with respiration, because if you acquire that precise, performance ensues. The identical tenet pertains to our existences. The majority of us endeavor to launch into our daytime at complete velocity, correspondences, gatherings, deadlines. But if you commence your daytime by reacting, you're not grounded. You're merely bracing. And when you reside in a state of bracing, you exhaust swiftly. But when you commence with cadence, a few diminutive, lucid triumphs, you're articulating your nervous system, we're secure, we're capable, we've acquired this. And you commence to construct from there. Here's what I signify by diminutive triumphs. It could exist as uncomplicated as preparing your slumber area, seizing a frigid shower, consuming a glass of liquid, inscribing a few lines in a journal, shifting your physique for 5 minutes, something that reminds you, I rendered a commitment to myself and I upheld it. This isn't concerning ticking a container. It's concerning constructing trust with yourself, and that trust is the fuel for motivation. You don't necessitate to perceive astonishing to commence. You necessitate to commence to perceive astonishing. That's where the majority of individuals acquire it backwards. They articulate, I'll commence note-taking when I perceive more concentrated, or I'll proceed for a stroll when I perceive more motivated. But neuroscience articulates a distinct narrative. The cerebrum doesn't fashion motivation in a vacuum. It fashions motivation from progress, from evidence, from motion. It's akin to pushing a vehicle that's immobilized in neutral. At initial, it seizes everything you've acquired, but once it commences to roll, even a modicum, the resistance diminishes. You're still pushing, but now the vehicle is assisting you. Impetus renders the labor simpler. I recall laboring with a founder who had constructed a wildly prosperous corporation. From the exterior, he glimpsed akin to the depiction of motivation. But he confessed something startling. He articulated, there are a plethora of sunrises I awaken and perceive vacant, akin to there's nothing within the tank. Thus I interrogated him, what do you execute when that transpires? He grinned and articulated, I fasten my footwear and amble around the block merely once. That's it, even if I don't desire to. Then he paused and, 9 instances out of 10, by the duration I'm back at my front entrance, something has shifted. Not everything, but sufficiently. It wasn't concerning the stroll, it existed concerning what the stroll represented. Motion, proof that the daytime had commenced, that he wasn't awaiting around for inspiration. He existed stepping into it. That's the confidencia the majority of individuals overlook. Motivation isn't a lightning strike, it's a spark. And you fashion this spark by advancing. You can apply this notion to anything: health, creativity, leadership, connections. Diminutive, intentional actions at the commencement of your daytime construct assurance. Not because they rectify everything, but because they remind you that you are not powerless. Let's be truthful, there are sunrises when existence perceives burdensome. The heft of responsibilities, the uncertainty of the prospect, the clamor of the globe. And in those instances, it's effortless to believe that executing one diminutive aspect won't matter. But it does, because that diminutive aspect carries something grander with it. Proof that you still possess agency, that you still acquire to decree what kind of daytime this will be. I contemplate of a client I labored with during a challenging season of grief. Every sunrise, she inscribed one sentence in a notebook, merely one. Some days it existed hopeful, some days it existed enraged, some days it existed fatigued, but she executed it regardless. One sentence. That constituted her triumph. That constituted her motion, and it tugged her through. You don't necessitate a flawlessly structured custom. You don't necessitate to awaken at dawn and operate a marathon. But you do necessitate to advance intentionally. You necessitate to demonstrate your cerebrum, we've commenced. 'Cause once you commence, everything alters. Diminutive triumphs construct impetus. Impetus constructs motivation, and motivation constructs consistency. This is what separates individuals who guide from individuals who pursue. Supervisors don't await to perceive prepared. They act purposefully and permit readiness to catch up. Thus, here's the query. What's your initial triumph tomorrow's sunrise? Not your 10th, not your peak performance instant, merely the initial aspect you'll execute to articulate yourself where in motion. It doesn't have to impress anybody, it merely has to be yours. Because once you stack that initial triumph, then another, and then another, you commence to amble into your daytime with a sensation of self-respect. And that self-respect, more than any external commendation, evolves into your engine. And when that engine commences, it's challenging to halt. You don't necessitate more duration. You don't necessitate more vitality. You merely necessitate to commence. And there's this notion circulating that success is concerning perceiving inspired all the duration, that great supervisors, high performers, purpose-driven individuals awaken every sunrise with conflagration in their abdomen, prepared to conquer the globe. But that's not how it functions, not even proximate. The truth is, even the most driven individuals possess off days, days when motivation is nowhere to be discovered, days when the alert sounds and every cell in their physique articulates, "not today." And that's why motivation by itself is unreliable. It's emotional, it fluctuates, it gets tossed around by slumber, stress, news, apprehension, existence, and if the exclusive aspect you're counting on to advance you forward is a sensation, then you're in tribulation. Because when that sensation vanishes, so does your progress. Contemplate concerning the sunrise, that initial 60 minutes of your daytime. It's fragile. It can tilt in any direction. A singular alert can toss you off course. One detrimental night's slumber can deplete your vitality. One anxious contemplation can tug you into a spiral. And yet you possess a system, a custom. Then regardless of what's swirling around you, you possess a groundwork. I once conversed with a Navy SEAL who articulated something that adhered with me. We don't ascend to the occasion, we descend to the stratum of our training. He wasn't conversing concerning combat, he existed conversing concerning existence, concerning pressure, concerning existing prepared, not in a flamboyant manner, but in a reliable manner. And that's what a sunrise custom is. It's your training, not for emergencies, but for everyday existence. And here's the aspect, it doesn't necessitate to be complicated. A beneficial custom isn't concerning executing more, it's concerning what matters and executing it with consistency. It's not concerning compressing productivity out of every minute, it's concerning setting an emotional and mental baseline so when the daytime commences tossing aspects at you, and it will, you're not scrambling, you're anchored. I contemplate of it akin to a pilot executing a pre-flight checklist. They don't execute it because they're uncertain. They execute it because the stakes are elevated. Because even with expertise, the system safeguards them from oversight, from stress, from human error. And you too are flying a high-stakes mission, your existence, your career, your household, your vision. The manner you commence each daytime matters more than you contemplate. Here's the arduous truth. Self-control will convey you when motivation won't. And self-control doesn't have to be clamorous or aggressive. It can be tranquil, gentle, a whisper in the sunrise that articulates, "This is what we execute." That's the kind of self-control that sustains, not the kind that punishes, but the kind that supports. I labored with a client, a creative, a designer, who struggled with inconsistency. His work existed brilliant, but his output existed erratic. When he existed motivated, he could fashion enchantment, but when he wasn't, nothing. weeks of nothing. And that unpredictability commenced to bleed into his assurance. Thus, we didn't commence with productivity tools or motivational talks. We commenced with one query. What's the smallest repeatable action you can seize every sunrise that aligns with the kind of individual you aspire to be? Not the most impressive, the most repeatable. He articulated, I could recline at my desk at 8 a.m. with a cup of caffeine, no pressure to fashion, merely exist there. That evolved into his system. That existed his safety net. Rain or shine, inspired or not, he reclined at his desk. And you discern what transpired over duration? Creativity commenced manifesting more frequently, not less. Because he'd fashioned an area for it, not when he felt akin to it, every daytime. That's what systems do. They fashion cadence, they fashion expectation, and most significantly, they furnish you something to fall back on when existence perceives burdensome. Your sunrise custom doesn't have to be impressive, it merely has to be there, something you can rely on, something that doesn't inquire how you perceive but simply reminds you you've been here previously. You discern how to commence. And that kind of stability fashions freedom, because when you discern how to initiate regardless of what the daytime conveys, you're not afraid of uncertainty. You're not frozen by overwhelm. You possess a location to return to. I desire to be lucid. This isn't concerning existing robotic, it's concerning existing resilient. A beneficial system frees you. It furnishes you area to perceive fatigued, to perceive uninspired, to perceive human without forfeiting your footing. Envision standing on a narrow beam. Every diminutive wobble tosses you off. But if you widen the beam, if you fashion a solid base, you can handle more. You can bend without breaking. Your sunrise custom is that wider beam, that base. Thus, don't await for motivation. Construct systems. Construct them when you perceive robust, so they can capture you when you don't. And permit your sunrise custom to be the initial one. Not because it will render you superior at everything else, although it will, as you don't discern where that conclusion is proceeding to be, but because it furnishes you something even more potent, a location to land, a manner to commence, and a reminder that regardless of how unpredictable existence gets, you are not commencing from zero. You are commencing from purpose every daytime. Leadership doesn't commence in the boardroom. It doesn't commence with strategy decks, squad gatherings, or substantial decisions. Leadership commences prior to anybody glimpsing you, prior to the correspondences, prior to the calls, prior to the anticipations commencing stacking up. It commences in the sunrise, in the tranquil instance where nobody is glimpsing. Because how you guide others is directly tied to how you guide yourself. And that self-leadership commences the second you unseal your eyes. You converse concerning leadership as a skill, communication, vision, decisiveness, and all of that is factual. But underneath all of that is something far more subtle, far more foundational: presence. A supervisor who is not present, who is rushed, scattered, reactive, doesn't inspire trust. Not because they're unqualified, but because their vitality articulates, I'm not here with you, I'm endeavoring to maintain pace with something else. And where's presence emanate from? It's not a switch you flip when you amble into a gathering. It's cultivated, and it initiates in the sunrise. The quality of your sunrise determines how you amble into your daytime. And how you amble into your daytime is how individuals experience you, not merely as a professional, but as an individual. I recall conversing with a founder who guided a squad of 80 individuals, talented, respected, driven, the kind of individual others naturally glimpse to for direction. But she informed me something that captured me off guard. I realized I existed conveying my disarray into every area. I wasn't merely guiding the gatherings, I existed infecting them. My stress existed setting the tone for everyone else. And then she articulated something even more potent. The problem wasn't my timetable. It existed how I existed commencing my daytime. I existed awakening already in defense mode, scrolling my gadget, skipping breakfast, hastening into back-to-back calls. No respiration, no lucidity, merely reacting. That's not leadership, that's survival. Thus, she rendered an alteration. Not a substantial, dramatic overhaul, merely a decision to seize the initial 20 minutes of every sunrise for herself. No gadget, no laptop, merely respiration, movement, tranquility, and one lucid query. How do I desire to manifest today? Altered everything, not merely for her squad. Gatherings became calmer, decisions became clearer, tension commenced to drop. Why? Because the individual ambling into the area wasn't frantic. She existed grounded, and that grounding rippled outward. That's what leadership is. Not command, not control. Vitality. And your sunrise is where that vitality gets sculpted. There's a myth that leadership is concerning invariably existing on, invariably accessible, invariably decisive. But genuine leadership, the kind that earns loyalty and drives culture, is concerning existing intentional. It's concerning ambling into areas with lucidity, not merely confidence. And you can't possess lucidity if your intellect is still catching up from the instant you awakened. Lucidity isn't a byproduct of caffeine, it's a byproduct of alignment. And alignment doesn't transpire coincidentally. It transpires when you carve out area to heed yourself, to your physique, to your intention. That's why your sunrise custom matters. It's not concerning optimization, it's concerning orientation. It's your internal compass reminding you who you are prior to the globe endeavoring to articulate you otherwise. Excessive supervisors awaken and step instantaneously into reaction. The gadget vibrates and they're already within the tempest. But if the initial voice you heed each daytime is the voice of urgency, you've already forfeited your center. And if you don't possess a center, how can you be one for others? One of the most overlooked responsibilities of leadership is emotional regulation. Your squad doesn't necessitate you to be flawless. They necessitate you to be anchored, to uphold a steady state even when the labor is arduous. And that steadiness, it doesn't emanate from willpower. It emanates from cadence, from structure, from possessing a system, a sunrise ritual that nourishes you prior to the demands of leadership depleting you. Contemplate a bit akin to this. You're the thermostat, not the thermometer. You don't merely mirror the temperature of the area, you set it. And if you amble in already overheated, that's what everyone else will perceive. But if you amble in with calm, lucidity, and intention, individuals seize their cue from that. They settle, they focus, they trust, and trust is the currency of leadership. I once labored with an executive who guided a global squad across 5 time zones. Her timetable existed a maze, and yet she possessed this unmistakable presence, calm, firm, and completely engaged. I interrogated her once how she remained so composed. She articulated, "My sunrises are non-negotiable. I don't timetable calls prior to 9. I don't peruse correspondences prior to. I've journaled and meditated not because I'm endeavoring to be some Zen master, but because my squad deserves the superior iteration of me, and I can't proffer that if I'm scattered." That's the core of it. Sunrise customs aren't concerning self-indulgence. They're concerning service. You manifest for yourself so that you can superiorly manifest for others. And let's be truthful, leadership is arduous. Individuals glimpse to you for answers, for guidance, for stability. And they don't care how numerous hours you slumbered or how replete your calendar is. They care concerning how you render them perceived secure, recognized, supported, and that vitality, that capacity to uphold others, it's born in the tranquility of the sunrise, not the velocity of your gathering. Thus, if you desire to guide superiorly, don't commence with your squad. Commence with your sunrise. Prior to the globe inquiring you for anything, inquire yourself, what kind of vitality do I desire to convey today? What kind of supervisor do I desire to be in every area I enter? Then construct a custom that supports that intention. Because in the conclusion, leadership isn't something you activate when the daytime commences. It's something you prepare for prior to the daytime even commencing. And when you execute that, when you encounter the sunrise with lucidity, presence, and purpose, you don't merely guide more effectively, you guide more authentically. And that's the kind of leadership the globe is ravenous for.